Hi, my name is Megan Edwards of Focus Communications, and this morning we're getting another update from FireFox Gold's chairman, Patrick Highsmith. FireFox Gold is a Finland gold explorer that trades on the Toronto Venture Stock Exchange under the symbol FFOX. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Megan. How are you?
Very good as well. And before we dive into the latest news from FireFox, could you give us a brief overview of the company and your Mustijärvi project in Finland?
Of course I will, Megan. As we've talked about many times, FireFox is a gold explorer focused exclusively in Lapland, Finland, an emerging greenstone belt there called the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt. We're a small company doing the exploration stage of work, yet we have a CEO based in Finland, exploration management based in Finland. We end up being a major player because of our large tenement position, adjoining and around many of the hottest projects in that part of the world, including Rupert's major discovery of the Ikkari gold deposit in northern Finland. And we've got a good balance of young, hardworking geologists in the field and gray hairs like me kind of working behind the scenes with the company. So we've been working there for about 5 years, and things are getting interesting.
Excellent.
And just a real quick overview here with this slide to get folks located. This is the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt in northern Finland. And with this slide, we highlight the infrastructure, incredible highway system in the north of Finland. We are 150 k's north of the Arctic Circle, more or less, right here. But we have international airport at Kittilä. Agnico Eagle's major Kittilä gold mine is near the top of the slide, the red mark there. Cities like Kittilä, Sodankylä, connected by paved highways, no need for helicopters in this part of the world. And yet most of the gold portion of this greenstone belt is fully pegged. And there's really only a few juniors and a couple of majors that have control of this emerging and exciting gold terrain. And what we're going to talk about today actually is the Mustajärvi project, which I've circled there with the oval. And we've been producing a lot of news at Mustajärvi over the last few years. And before we get into the actual news, I've just zoomed in on the property here. You can see a paved highway crossing through the property. We're about 20-minute drive from the international airport at Kittilä here. And goes back a few years, this initial discovery here by Outokumpu, Finland's national mining company, back in the 90s with 12 drill holes in that area we call the Central Zone. We acquired it in 2018 before we listed the company and began taking till samples and doing geophysics. As you can see here, the colored map is magnetics. We identified a major structure coming through, which is the black line there that runs across the property from southwest to northeast. And not only did we drill in the Central Zone and hit some nice gold in 2018 and 19, we stepped out in 2020 into the northeast target where we hit more bonanza grade gold. And then another step out of over 700 meters led us to where we've recently been drilling in the east target, which is so far the best mineralization encountered at Mustajärvi. And so 2023 will be the year, we believe, of determining the structural controls on this high-grade orogenic gold system and stepping out to drill for scale and potential, Megan.
So yesterday, the company announced an update from the Mustijärvi project where FireFox has completed a step-out drill program at the east target while also reporting a strong cobalt intercept. Could you walk us through this release?
Yes, the release yesterday was a little unusual because we're still pending all the gold and multi-element assays on the 8 holes that are discussed within. However, we did want to put the release out to show a map of where we drilled and also why we drilled there. These are the first sizable step outs from the discovery at the east target. We believe we have some important structural controls figured out. So we wanted to get the news flow started, let people know what was coming. And as I said, with these step outs on the west side, we do discuss where we drilled and we show some details, but also the why. And let me just say, let's look at the why here, because as I mentioned previously, that last red bullet point, determining the structural controls. What's controlling this gold? It comes almost to surface. It's high grade. It's sometimes nice thick intercepts. 200 gram meter holes have been drilled here. And we're asking the question, and I'm sure the market and larger mining companies are also asking it. Sure, Mustajärvi has high grades. It's shallow. There's lots of drilling, lots of work still to do, but is there size potential? Well, we are learning a lot about that, Megan, and I'm just going to go through a couple of slides here to discuss that. This is a figure we've been showing for some time. What it is a long section, a slice through about 2 kilometers of strike of the Mustajärvi shear zone. And we've highlighted the central zone, the northeast target, and the east target along that section. And so you're seeing a surface view of magnetics, the colors there, and then a slice through the earth of the drill intercepts that are the high grade or the purple colors, greater than 10 grams in the subsurface. And a couple things to point out here. If we look at these data in the top part of the image, you see there are a number of these sort of northeast, southwest patterns in the magnetics data. I'm just highlighting a few of them here. They kind of repeat across the property in a few places. We've interpreted some faults in those areas. And those patterns, the cooler colors, if you will, in that magnetics are showing us an alteration that we now know goes with the gold. And as those things get bent around and folded and broken up, we've drilled a number of those and we've hit high-grade gold there. So that's an important pattern that we're beginning to see here. And the other thing to look at is elevation control. Think of that vertical slice of the earth, Megan, and central zone, you see some purple dots, mostly quite shallow near the surface. Those are high-grade intercepts. Northeast target, they're a little deeper, maybe 50 to 120 meters or so below surface. And then at the east target, notice how they're all clustered at the surface. So consider that these things are several hundred meters apart. And the idea is, do they continue to depth? And that is an important question to be asked. And also, is there a relationship between these 3 different loads of mineralization that we've been drilling? So I think this image is pretty interesting because it shows 1.5 kilometers over which we've drilled high-grade gold, sometimes near surface, sometimes a little deeper. And just notice how few lines there are going deep on the slide. There's only one hole that touches 300 meters in this entire distance. So let's just look at what we drilled and what we showed in the news release. So here we see a new image because it shows the outline of the east target gold shape. Now, this does not imply there's a resource here. This is a shape in yellow in the center of the slide that is a leapfrog model of the gold shape above 2.5 grams per ton projected to surface. So more or less, this is where we've hit the good stuff, Megan, that yellow there. And you can see there are gaps in the upper left of it and gaps between the linear pod on the left-hand side. And so when we came about to drill this, we wanted to do 2 things. First, we want to infill some of those gaps. And those mean the black holes, they're all labeled, the ones we just drilled. Some of those are 20, 25 meters away from other drilling. And you'll see a couple of them cross in that sort of open area up in here, because we want to know, hey, is there gold in there? Obviously, we want to fill that shape in. We've also gone to the north here, as you can see, way down here to the south, that hole there. So we are doing some step outs, but again, kind of close to the central part of the system because we've done a lot of geology and we think we understand that the gold is occupying these magnetic lows. We had more geophysical anomalies to test also, and that's where we did the bigger step outs. And so now if you look down to the west, Megan, you can see here, we went about 80 meters away from any previous drilling with hole 5 here, and we drilled that direction. And then we went another 120 meters, 140 meters or so from there, and we drilled hole 8 in that direction. Notice this corridor is kind of subtle, of more orange instead of red. That is a magnetic low, probably plunging off to the southwest. We've done a lot of work. We've taken a lot of measurements in our oriented drill core here to nail that down. And that's telling us that the system is open to the southwest, needs to be more tested there. And we end up with these big step outs that we've been talking about, 80 meters, 220 meters away from previous drilling. So very kind of a bold step out program, in addition to some closer in infill. And we've indicated with arrows where drilling does not close off the mineralization yet. So our preliminary impressions from what we call quick logging the core, Megan, are that the results look good geologically. We believe that the alteration and the structures persist in that center area, and that we're going to find more gold there when we the southwest, that we see alteration in structures that are encouraging off to the southwest. Again, preliminary, no assays yet, but geologically, we're very encouraged.
And these are the first major step outs for FireFox at Mustajärvi East as you explore the size of the system. However, I think I remember back in 2020 and 2021, you took some big step outs from the central zone and the northeast target. Is the thought here that the system continues from one target area to another?
No, the key part, what you're asking as to whether they connect, the big picture, if you will. It's not likely, obviously, that all three of these pods connect in one solid block of gold mineralized rock. That never happens. Thank goodness, because I wouldn't have a job anymore. But that's why this is hard work. But the structural trend is holding up. The geophysics is working. We're seeing consistently this southwest to northeast trending theme. We've been able to predict where these structures go now. And each of these lodes has yielded good grades, 10 grams per ton or more, significant grade thickness. Nominally, we've hit 100-gram meter grade thickness holes in each of those three pods, and the east target has now yielded at least 4 holes with greater than 200-gram meters of grade thickness. So we believe this deposit is ultimately going to be made up of numerous lodes of relatively high-grade mineralization, as are all great orogenic gold deposits. So it's early days, but within this footprint, Megan, these were aggressive step-out holes, going out 80 meters, 140 more meters, over 200 meters. And that's because we spent time figuring out the controls and we thought we could predict where it would go. And we've now gone off and drilled to look for both size and quality potential at Mustajärvi East. And I predict there'll be some more big step outs as we apply these learnings elsewhere.
So let's touch on depth here, as the company is now testing down dip at the east target at Mustajärvi. For those that are just getting up to speed on this target, could you discuss the depth of early discovery holes?
Well, frankly, Megan, we just haven't done the work on this testing the system at depth at all yet. Okay, the latest round of intercepts reported in the first quarter, which were the heart of the east target, those strong intercepts were between 10 and 35 meters below surface. And remember, there's a few meters of glacial sediment there on top of the bedrock. So this thing basically comes to surface, which is great. We've seen some high grades at great depth, not at greater depths, I shouldn't say great depths. We hit, for instance, 170 grams over about a meter width at 90 meters depth in the east target earlier this year. And we also announced a 9-gram hit a little deeper at 220 meters or so below surface. But those tend to be the narrower vein-controlled structures. This replacement body, these thicker intercepts, it's thicker, but it's highly folded and faulted, sort of sheared, and we've not explored it at all to depth. So we haven't gone to depth on that yet. These step outs to the southwest may tag into it a little deeper as it goes in that direction, we think. But we know orogenic gold systems can persist to more than 2 kilometers depth in Lapland and elsewhere around the world. But for now, we're focusing on the shallow parts of the system to better understand that before we would drill deeper.
So you also announced elevated cobalt in hole 22 MJ021, something we haven't seen from the company before. Is this unique to this area in Finland?
Well, Megan, you know I'm a geochemist, so I love to talk about that stuff, okay? The geochemistry of this system, this is really the bigger picture, has been very consistent. Central zone through the northeast target to the east is all very similar chemistry over that 1.5 kilometers. And that means the gold is associated strongly with bismuth, tellurium, cobalt, nickel, molybdenum, selenium, and maybe a few others. But interestingly, it is not correlated with silver or arsenic or copper. Now that's intriguing because Kittilä, the big mine in Finland, has a lot of arsenic, whereas the Ikkari discovery has lower arsenic, but it does have a bit of copper. Both arsenic and copper can be negatives in a gold system. You really don't know till you do the metallurgy. But as to whether this is unique, we do know that there are those exploring further south in Finland for so-called cobalt gold deposits. That's being discussed around the world. The Idaho Cobalt in the U.S., Idaho Cobalt Belt in the U.S. also has some gold. And often they're drilling grades of cobalt that are similar or inferior to what we've drilled here. So I flipped over to show a picture here of the drill core. And you can see here, these are some of the high-grade gold intercepts, and I highlight the visible gold on the top photo. But in the lower right, notice all that brassy stuff where I had the yellow text, pyrite. The pyrite is associated with the gold. We already knew that. We've seen that under the microscope. And it's also containing the cobalt. And as we highlight there in the news release and on the slide, that hole 22 MJ021 had that over that 15-meter intercept of 13 grams gold. It also had quite high cobalt at 0.15% cobalt. And the sub-intercept, the 6.5 meters of very high-grade gold of almost 20 grams gold, ran 0.27% cobalt. So it's consistent. It's associated with the high-grade part of the system. It's also associated with both the veins, like in the upper left, and this replacement style of mineralization in the right-hand side of this slide. So the cobalt is there. It's an important chemical indicator for sure. And it is interesting. Maybe it helps classify Mustajärvi someday into a class of gold, cobalt, orogenic deposits. But I do want to caution, we do not assign any economic importance to this intercept yet, as we've done no work on the ability to recover that cobalt. It's not in an exotic mineral or anything. It's in the pyrite. Nevertheless, no work's been done on that. And so right now we're using that geochemistry as a tool. Are we in the same system? Are we getting close to the gold? So forth. But hey, those are big cobalt numbers, and we wanted the world to know about them.
And to cap things off, why don't you tell us what's next and what to expect in the coming weeks to FireFox?
Yes, we're doing a lot of geology right now, Megan. The guys are doing detailed logging of this drill core with photos and such, and we'll probably discuss more of that geology before or when the assays come out. But we're also doing a lot of waiting. These days, it seems that a spring drill program means summer assays. Back in the old days, Megan, spring drilling usually meant spring assays as well, but we're waiting more these days. So it'll probably be July sometime when these assays are complete. Keep in mind, if they're high grade, they have to get assayed at least twice for so-called overlimit assays. So sometimes that happens to us before we can report from Mustajärvi. So we expect those to come in July or so. In the meantime, we'll keep getting some news out on the geology that we're doing. For instance, the mineralization at the east target is so shallow. We are planning a trenching program to actually get into the system where we can really measure the structures and maybe take some larger or mini bulk type samples. We'll also be doing the first metallurgical recovery work on Mustajärvi yet done, and that'll be happening during the second half of the year. So good news flow. Stay tuned for that. The guys are hard at work in Finland.
So thanks again for coming on the show today, Patrick, and we're looking forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.